The moment Jack recognized the homeless woman huddled against the storefront as his ex-wife Sarah, his world stopped spinning. Their eyes met across the busy sidewalk, and in that instant, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. But what he couldn't possibly know was that the truth behind her downfall would shatter everything he thought he understood about the past 5 years. Jack stood frozen, shopping bags hanging limply from his hands, as pedestrians streamed around him like water around a stone. Sarah looked away first, pulling her tattered coat tighter and shrinking into herself. She was almost unrecognizable, her once vibrant auburn hair now dull and matted, her face gaunt and weathered beyond her 36 years. How had the woman who once had everything ended up here, begging for spare change on a cold December evening? If you think you know where this story is heading, I promise you don't. What Jack discovers in the coming days will challenge everything you believe about second chances and forgiveness. Stay with me until the end, you won't regret it. And if this story touches your heart, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to see more stories that explore the depths of human connection. 5 years earlier, their divorce had been ugly, the kind that leaves emotional shrapnel embedded so deeply that neither person ever fully heals. Jack had fought for custody of their daughter, Emma, then only 7 years old. Sarah had fought back initially, but then suddenly and inexplicably stopped showing up to court dates. Her lawyer cited personal issues, and within months, she had vanished completely from their lives. No calls, no visits, no child support. Just silence. "Dad, who's that lady you're staring at?" Emma's voice snapped Jack back to the present. Now 12, she tugged at his sleeve, her eyes following his gaze but showing no recognition of the woman who had given birth to her. "Nobody, sweetheart," Jack lied, his throat tight. "Let's get home before the ice cream melts." That night, after tucking Emma into bed, Jack sat alone in his kitchen, nursing a glass of whiskey and wrestling with the memory of Sarah's hollow eyes. He had spent years building a narrative that helped him make sense of her abandonment, that she had chosen freedom over responsibility, that she had never truly loved them. It was easier that way, cleaner. But seeing her reduced to begging challenged everything he had told himself. The next morning, Jack dropped Emma at school and drove back to the spot where he'd seen Sarah. She wasn't there. He returned at lunch, then after work, and finally found her as evening approached, sitting on the same piece of cardboard, a paper cup with a few coins in front of her. "Sarah," he said, standing over her. She looked up, her eyes vacant at first, then filling with shame as recognition dawned. "Jack." Her voice was a rasp, barely audible above the street noise. "What happened to you?" The question came out harsher than he intended. Sarah's laugh was hollow. "Life happened. Bad choices. Worse luck." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "How's Emma?" "She's good." "She's..." Jack hesitated. "She doesn't remember you much anymore." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She nodded slowly, tears welling. "That's probably for the best." Jack should have walked away then. He had a good life now, a promotion at work, a comfortable home, a daughter who was thriving despite her mother's absence. Getting involved with Sarah again could only complicate things. But something kept him rooted to the spot, a nagging sense that there was more to the story than he knew. "Let me buy you dinner," he said finally. "Just to talk." What Sarah revealed over that meal at a quiet diner would turn Jack's carefully reconstructed life upside down. But I'll get to that in a moment. First, I need to tell you about the letter Jack found when he returned home that night, a letter that had been delivered 5 years ago but had slipped behind the radiator in his old apartment, only to be discovered by the new tenant during renovations. A letter from Sarah, postmarked just weeks after she disappeared. If you're finding this story compelling, please consider subscribing to our channel for more powerful human stories that explore the complexities of relationships and redemption. The letter was tear-stained and written in Sarah's unmistakable handwriting. It began simply, "Jack, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, but not for the reasons you think." As Jack read on, his hands began to shake. Sarah explained that she had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer shortly after their divorce proceedings began. The doctors had given her months to live. "I couldn't bear for Emma to watch me die," Sarah had written. "I couldn't stand the thought of her remembering me wasted away, a shell of myself. Better she think I abandoned her than carry that burden. I've signed away my parental rights not because I don't love her, but because I love her too much to put her through that." Jack sat heavily on his couch, the letter clutched in his trembling hands. For 5 years, he had nurtured his anger, had used it as a shield against the pain of abandonment. He had painted Sarah as selfish, uncaring. He had allowed Emma to forget her mother rather than keeping her memory alive. And yet, here was Sarah, alive, not dead as the letter implied she would be. What had happened? Had the diagnosis been wrong? Had she recovered only to fall into some other tragedy? The next day, Jack returned to the diner, this time with the letter. Sarah was already there, looking marginally better after a hot meal and a night in the motel room Jack had paid for. "You were supposed to be dead," Jack said without preamble, sliding the letter across the table. Sarah stared at it, recognition and then confusion crossing her face. "Where did you get this?" "It was delivered to our old apartment." "It got lost." Jack watched her carefully. "You told me you had cancer. Terminal cancer." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I did. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. The prognosis was 3 to 6 months. But you're here." She nodded slowly. "I am. I went through experimental treatment at a clinical trial. It was brutal, worse than the cancer in some ways. I was sure I was dying, and I didn't want Emma's last memories of me to be that. But then the impossible happened. I responded to the treatment. And you didn't come back to us?" Jack's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby diners. "By then, you had full custody. You had moved. Changed your numbers. Your lawyer made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me." Sarah's voice was steady despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. "And I had nothing, no money, no home, no job. The medical bills had bankrupted me. What could I offer Emma?" Jack sat back, stunned. "So you just gave up?" "I tried to rebuild my life," Sarah said. "I got clean from the pain meds I'd become dependent on during treatment. I found a job, a small apartment. I was saving to hire a lawyer, to try to get visitation rights." Her voice broke. "Then I got sick again. Not cancer this time, an autoimmune condition triggered by the treatment that saved my life. I lost my job when I couldn't work. Then my apartment. Then everything." The silence between them stretched, filled with 5 years of misunderstandings and missed connections. Jack thought of all the times Emma had asked about her mother in those early years, and how his answers had grown increasingly bitter until she stopped asking altogether. "Emma has a dance recital next week," Jack said finally. "Would you like to come?" The look of hope that transformed Sarah's face was almost too painful to witness. But what Jack didn't know was that his simple invitation would set in motion a chain of events that would test his forgiveness in ways he couldn't imagine. If this story of misunderstanding and second chances is resonating with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content that explores the depths of human relationships. The day of Emma's recital arrived, and Jack found himself pacing outside the school auditorium, checking his watch every few minutes. He had picked Sarah up from the motel where she was still staying, had given her money for new clothes, had even driven her to a salon to get her hair done. She looked more like the woman he had once loved, though still thin, still carrying the shadows of her ordeal in her eyes. "She doesn't know you're coming," Jack warned as they waited. "I thought it would be better as a surprise, after the performance." Sarah nodded, clutching her purse with white knuckles. "What if she hates me?" "She doesn't hate you," Jack said, though he wasn't entirely sure. He had spent years carefully avoiding saying anything overtly negative about Sarah to Emma, but his silence and occasional bitter remarks had spoken volumes. The recital was beautiful, Emma graceful and confident in her ballet solo. Jack saw Sarah wiping away tears throughout the performance, her eyes never leaving their daughter. Afterward, as parents and children mingled in the lobby, Jack led Sarah through the crowd toward Emma, who was chatting excitedly with her friends. "Emma," Jack called. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." Emma turned, her smile fading to confusion as she took in the stranger beside her father. But then something flickered in her eyes, a flash of recognition, of memory. "Mom?" The word was barely audible. Sarah stepped forward hesitantly. "Emma. You were so beautiful up there." What happened next would test the limits of Jack's newfound compassion. Emma's face contorted with a mixture of emotions, confusion, recognition, and then, most painfully, anger. "Why are you here?" Emma demanded, her voice rising. "You left us. You didn't want us." Sarah flinched as if struck. "Emma, that's not. I don't want to talk to you." Emma turned to Jack, betrayal written across her face. "Why did you bring her here? This was my special day." Before either adult could respond, Emma pushed past them and ran toward the exit. Jack moved to follow, but Sarah caught his arm. "Let me," she said. "Please." Against his better judgment, Jack nodded. He watched as Sarah followed their daughter outside, his heart hammering with anxiety. Had he made a terrible mistake? 10 minutes passed, then 20. Jack was about to go looking for them when they finally returned, Emma's eyes red from crying but her posture less rigid. She didn't look at Jack as she approached. "Dad, can Mom come over for dinner tomorrow?" Emma asked, her voice small but steady. Relief flooded through Jack. "Of course she can." That dinner was the first of many as Sarah slowly reintegrated into their lives. Jack helped her find a small apartment nearby and connected her with a friend who needed administrative help at his law firm, a job she could do even on days when her health wasn't at its best. Emma's initial anger gave way to cautious curiosity, then to a tentative rebuilding of their relationship. But just as things seemed to be stabilizing, Jack received a phone call that threatened to unravel everything they had worked to rebuild. Sarah's ex-boyfriend, the man she had briefly lived with during her darkest days after treatment, had been released from prison. He was looking for her, claiming she had stolen money from him before his arrest for drug dealing. "He's dangerous, Jack," Sarah admitted when confronted. "And yes, I took money from him, to get away, to try to start over. I was desperate." Jack faced an impossible choice: cut ties with Sarah to protect Emma and himself from this new threat, or stand by the woman who was fighting so hard for redemption. What would you do in his position? Think about it as I tell you what happened next. If you're invested in Jack and Sarah's journey, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that explore complex human dilemmas. Jack decided to stand by Sarah, but with conditions. He insisted she file a restraining order against her ex-boyfriend, Marcus, and he hired a security company to install cameras at her apartment. For weeks, they lived in a state of heightened vigilance, jumping at shadows and unexpected noises. Then, one evening when Sarah was having dinner at Jack's house, her apartment was broken into. The security cameras captured clear footage of Marcus ransacking the place, clearly searching for something. The police arrested him for violating the restraining order, but he was released on bail within days. "He won't stop," Sarah said, her voice shaking as they sat in Jack's living room after Emma had gone to bed. "The money I took, it wasn't just money. There was a flash drive with information about his suppliers, his customers. I was going to turn it over to the police, but then I got sick again, and I hid it and tried to forget about it." "Where is it now?" Jack asked. Sarah looked away. "In a storage unit I can no longer afford to pay for. It's probably been auctioned off by now." Jack made another decision that night, one that would put everything on the line. He tracked down the company that owned the storage facility and discovered that Sarah's unit had indeed been scheduled for auction, in 2 days' time. The morning of the auction, Jack and Sarah arrived early, hoping to speak with the facility manager. What they didn't expect was to find Marcus already there, talking to a group of rough-looking men in the parking lot. "He must have tracked the unit down too," Sarah whispered, shrinking down in the passenger seat of Jack's car. "Stay here," Jack instructed, pulling out his phone to call the police. But before he could dial, Marcus spotted them and started walking toward their car, his face twisted with rage. What happened in the next few minutes would change all their lives forever. Marcus reached the car and began pounding on the window, screaming obscenities. When Jack tried to drive away, one of Marcus's associates blocked their path with another vehicle. Trapped and terrified, Jack made a split-second decision. He threw the car into reverse, intending to find another exit, but in his panic, he didn't see the storage facility worker who had stepped behind the car. The impact wasn't severe, but it was enough to send the young man sprawling to the pavement. In the chaos that followed, police sirens, paramedics, statements and counter-statements, one thing became clear: Jack could face charges for reckless driving or even assault with a vehicle, depending on how the prosecutor viewed the incident. The storage unit and its contents were forgotten as Jack faced the possibility of criminal charges. The worker wasn't seriously injured, but Marcus and his friends were claiming that Jack had deliberately tried to run people over in a drug-fueled rage. "This is all my fault," Sarah said as they sat in Jack's kitchen later that night, Emma having been sent to stay with her grandparents until things settled down. "I've ruined your life, just like I almost ruined Emma's." Jack should have been angry. He had every right to be. His clean record, his reputation, his custody of Emma, all were now at risk because of Sarah's past. But as he looked at her across the table, all he felt was a profound sadness for everything they had lost and might still lose. "We'll figure this out," he said, reaching for her hand. "Together." The next few weeks were a blur of lawyer meetings, court appearances, and anxious waiting. The charges against Jack were reduced to reckless driving after security footage showed he had been trying to escape a threatening situation, but he still faced fines and community service. Marcus was arrested again, this time for witness intimidation, and held without bail. Through it all, Sarah stood by Jack, testifying on his behalf and taking responsibility for her role in the situation. And something unexpected began to happen. They started to remember why they had fallen in love in the first place. "I never stopped loving you," Sarah admitted one evening as they sat on Jack's porch, watching the sunset. "Even when I thought I was dying, even when I was at my lowest on the streets, I carried you and Emma in my heart." Jack was silent for a long moment. "I tried to hate you," he said finally. "It was easier than missing you." Their reconciliation wasn't immediate or easy. There were arguments about the past, fears about the future, and always the shadow of Sarah's health issues, which could flare up at any time. But slowly, cautiously, they began to rebuild not just friendship, but something deeper. Emma, initially wary of her parents' renewed connection, gradually came to accept and even welcome it. "Are you and Mom getting back together?" she asked Jack one night as he tucked her in. "Would that be okay with you?" Jack asked carefully. Emma considered this. "She makes you smile more. And she helps me with my science homework better than you do." Jack laughed. High praise indeed. 6 months after that fateful day when Jack spotted Sarah begging on the street, they stood together in a courthouse again, not for a trial this time, but to officially amend their divorce decree to allow for shared custody of Emma. It wasn't a remarriage, not yet, but it was a commitment to moving forward together, whatever challenges might come. As they left the courthouse, Sarah paused on the steps, looking out at the city that had been the setting for both her greatest despair and her unexpected redemption. "I never thought I'd get a second chance," she said softly. "Not with Emma, not with you, not with life itself." Jack took her hand, feeling the strength that had returned to her grip. Sometimes the things that break us are also what put us back together, he said. Just differently than before. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. Sarah's health would always be precarious. The years they had lost could never be.